All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. So today's daf is Kuf Chaf Beis 122. We are picking up from 121b, the last line on the daf. We'll say we dedicate our shir this morning in the great zuchos of the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We dedicate the shir first of all again in the Zchus of Aliyah for the neshamas of all of the precious soldiers who gave their lives fighting for Yerushalayim, paving the way to Yerushalayim, that we could enjoy the beautiful city, the coastal Ma'aravi that we have today. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, their neshamas will have an Aliyah, and we hope that the great Simcha that we celebrate that occurred 50 years ago, hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be mashlim that Simcha with the coming of Mashiach Meir Rabbi Amenu. Amen. So says the Gemara, and again, how beautiful it is that we're in the middle of the sugya of Eretz Yisrael. See, Bailahu, Eretz Yisrael l'shvatim iflog, o dilma l'karfeif karvi iflog. So also the Gemara asked an interesting question. Was Yerushalayim divided up, was Eretz Yisrael divided up amongst the shvatim, or was Eretz Yisrael divided up by according to each individual? That's the shayla. So meaning, did every single person get a portion in Eretz Yisrael? Or ultimately, again, was Eretz Yisrael divided up amongst the Shvatim, and then each Shevet had the responsibility to divide up the land among its constituents. So top of Kuf Chaf Beis, Tashma. So let's analyze this. Bein Rav Lema'at. So the Gemara says over here, the pasuk says that ultimately the land is divided up through a goral, through a lottery. Bein Rav Lema'at. Now the Rashbam points out to Rabosai that Bein Rav Lema'at only makes sense if at the end of the day it's being divided up by shvatim. Because we'll say if it's being divided up head by head, then everybody's getting an equal portion pretty much. Ben Rav Lama'at, when you say a little or a lot, that indicates to us that Lama'aser Eretz Yisrael was being divided up amongst the shvatim. We'll see, just so you understand, this question of Eretz Yisrael being divided up amongst the shvatim or individuals is also an interesting, profound, like hashkafic question about Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, is Eretz Yisrael something that we enjoy a personal relationship with, or is Eretz Yisrael something that we enjoy a Klal Yisrael relationship? In other words, is the relationship between the land and the people exactly that between the land and the people, the nation, Klal Yisrael, as expressed in the tribes, or is the relationship between Eretz Yisrael and the Jew what we'll call a kesher ishi, or a kesher prati, an individual relationship between the land and every individual. So that's the fundamental underpinning of this shaila. So the Gemara says another brayz that says, "Asid Eretz Yisrael shetischalek l'shlosh asar shvatim." So let's say this is interesting. In the future, Eretz Yisrael will be divided up amongst 13 tribes. Shebetchila lo nischalka. When we say the future, we mean Mashiach. Shebetchila lo nischalka el l'shnei masar shvatim, v'lo nischalka el bekesef. Because also when the land was first divided, it was only divided up amongst 12 tribes. Now we're going to discuss exactly what that means. So we'll say the way the Havamina, the way the Gemara is understanding it now, is that if certain tribes got more valuable land, so there would be like a payoff from one tribe to another to try to equalize the monetary value of what it is that they receive. We'll explain that in a little bit greater depth. Shene'emar bein Rav Lema'at. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says, what does this mean? Sa'abi Yehuda shavachamish begadol. So for example, Rabbi Yehuda says that one sa'ah of land in the tribal area of Yehuda was worth 5 sa'ah of land in the north, in the Galil. Furthermore, again, the land was only divided up through lottery. Shene'emar ach begoral. But one second, but the Gemara says that the land was divided up through the Urim Turim. We'll say again, remember the Urim Turim refers to the breastplate worn by the Kohen Gadol, that they were able to ask questions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Ribbon Shalom would communicate to them through the medium of the Choshen. Specifically, again, remember, the names of the 12 tribes of the Shatim are written on the Choshen, so when the Kohen Gadol, the Melech or the Navi were to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu a question, the Ribbon Shalom would respond ultimately again by having the letters light up, and those letters would be put together into a message. So we have an interesting idea over here. On one hand, the Torah says that Eretz Yisrael was divided up through a gorah, through a lottery. Yet it says afterwards that it's through Urim V'Tumim. Shneimar api agora haketzad. So we'll say, which one is it? Is it that the land was divided up through a lottery, or the land was divided up through Urim V'Tumim? To which the Gemara says, essentially, both. So ketzad Elazar melubash Urim V'Tumim. Elazar would wear the Urim V'Tumim. V'Yoshua v'Chol Yisrael omdim lefanav. So we'll say, and Yoshua and all of Klal Yisrael are standing before Elazar. V'Kalfi shel Shvatim, v'Kalfi shel Tchumin, munachin lefanav. And I will say what happens. There are two boxes of lots. So one box that was filled with 12 lots for each of the Shvatim, and one box that was filled with 12 lots for the different portions of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so two different boxes with two different lotteries happening over here. So what happens? So what would happen? Elazar, the Kohen Gadol, would receive through Ruach HaKodesh, which also Bepashtos means through the Urim V'Tumim. V'amar Zvulun Ola Tchum Ako. Zvulun Ola Tchum Ako Ola Imo. And Elazar would say the following: I'm about to pick out the lot of Zvulun from we'll call the tribal lottery, and I'm going to pick out for Zvulun the tribal area of Akko, the Akko area of Akko. And what happens? Taraf Baka. So again, prophetically, he said which lot he was going to draw, which tribe he was going to draw, and which tribal area he was going to draw. Taraf Bakafi shal Shvatim va'ala biyado Zvulun. So we'll say, sure enough, he put his hand into the pot and drew out the card of Zvulun, the lot of Zvulun. Taraf Bakafi shal Tchumin va'ala biyado Tchum Akko. Then he would reach in to the container with the lots of the areas of Eretz Yisrael, and he pulled out Akko. And again, Elazar Cohen would say, Omer, Naftali Ola, Utchum Ginosar Ola Imo. He said, the next card I'm going to pick is going to be Naftali, and afterwards Ginosar is going to come with him. Sure enough, Taraf Bakalfi shal Shvatim, Va'ala biyado Naftali, Taraf Bakalfi shal Tchumin, Va'ala biyado Tchum Gino. So we'll say first wide line, Kuf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. So sure enough, again, what would happen prophetically, he was able to tell which one he was going to go ahead and pick out. He picked out Naftali, picked out Ginosa. Beautiful. V'chein kol shevet v'shevet. And I will say, ultimately, again, this was done with each and every shevet. And I will say, now the obvious kasha that you're asking yourself is, why was this necessary? In other words, why the need? First of all, if you're already using the Urim V'Tumim, why need the lottery? And if you want to use the lottery, why use the Urim V'Tumim? So take a look at the Rashbam. It's the second wide line in the Rashbam, the last two words on the line. V'hayu mechavin. V'hayu mechavin b'rach HaKodesh. Kolomar, b'urim v'tumim, she'sholim tchila b'urim v'tumim, kodim she'yitraf hamamuna b'kalfi. So again, Elazar Cohen would ask the Urim v'tumim before he would draw the lots. Ubikach miskareres daiton shal Yisrael. We'll say this was done essentially in order to show Klal Yisrael that the chalukah, that the division of Eretz Yisrael was glat, that there are no questions, that no one should get upset with what they get. He says, "Shagol ha'ya'ola k'moshe nisnavet chila, v'yodim shechaluka yisharihi, v'lo hayu meranim b'dvar ha'shvatim ha'merubin, u'shnei kalfe u'tzvichen, echal l'shvatim ve'echal l'tchumin, v'lo sagi b'chad l'tchumin, v'leima achsho aniyoto mashiyala b'yadi, tzorach ruvein dimkein, ein kol ha'chaluka suyi b'gora, u'kra kama ach b'gora, v'lo tzaz divra v'viv." So we'll say, this is actually very interesting. So essentially the Rashbam says, and this is an interesting psychology, you can understand that when Eretz Yisrael, was like one of the most amazing things about Eretz Yisrael is what? Is the incredibly diverse topography and temperature within a very small area. Within a very small area. It's exceptionally dramatic, right? It's like, I always feel, I'm always amazed by this. When you drive from Yerushalayim to the Yam HaMelech, to the Dead Sea, in Gedi, Masada area, and it's amazing how in one moment you're in the middle of a city, and literally again, 10 minutes, you are in the middle of Midbar Yehuda. You're literally in the middle of a desert. So one has to understand that when dividing up the land, it's not the pshat that like Eretz Yisrael is just flat land, right? And everything is fertile soil and everybody's pretty much getting the same thing. Meaning you've got very diverse topography. And as a result, again, you have different people getting different things. It would be understandable that there's the potential for some animosity or some jealousy, and already we saw that there was, even with everything they did. The goal over here was to show the people that the chalukah, the division, was from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the goal. So you wanna be upset with what you got. I understand, but take it up with God. I mean, this is what the Ribono Shel Olam is giving you. So the way they solidified that ultimately again was using both the Urim V'Tumim as well as the Goral. This way, beyond the shadow of a doubt, this was orchestrated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the hope is that if I'm getting the portion that God allotted for me, hopefully I will be happy with that. So the Gemara goes right. We'll say second wide line in the Gemara. And the division of Eretz Yisrael that happened historically is not going to be the same as the division of Eretz Yisrael when Mashiach comes. We'll say Olam, so the Olam Haba over here refers to Yemos HaMashiach. So we'll say this is amazing, by the way, that apparently again one of the amazing things that's going to happen is that Mashiach is going to once again divide up Eretz Yisrael amongst the Shvatim. He says, so the Chalukah, the first Chalukah by Yoshua, bless you, is different than the Chalukah of Mashiach. How so? So the Gemara says, Ha'olam hazeh yesh lo adam sada lavan ein lo sada pardes ein lo sada lavan. So we'll say when Yoshua divided up the land, so if you got a grain field, you didn't get an orchard, and if you got an orchard, you didn't get a grain field. In other words, the Torah say everybody got different things within the land. However, the Olam Haba in the future when Mashiach comes, kol echad ve'echad, aval the Olam Haba ein lecha kol echad ve'echad she'in lo bahar ubashvela ube'emek. Shne'emar, Sha'ar Ruvain echad, Sha'ar Yehuda echad, Sha'ar Levi echad. HaKadosh says, so amazing if when Mashiach comes and he redivides Eretz Yisrael, everyone is going to have everything. So a person is going to have some territory in the mountains, some in the valleys, some in the flat fields. It's going to have some orchards, some vineyards. So we'll say, so what's the pshat? So well, actually, one more piece. Furthermore, again, the Gemara says, furthermore, again, it's not going to be the Melech HaMashiach who conducts the chalukah, who conducts the division. Rather, it's going to be the Ribono Shel Olam who conducts the division. Shnei Amar, ve'ela machlakosam nu'um Hashem. So we'll say, if you think about this, by the way, it's so beautiful. What does it mean ultimately? I mean, what's the deeper meaning? That when Yeshua divided up the land, if you got an orchard, you didn't get a grain field. If you got a grain field, you didn't get an orchard. What I meant to say is that at the end of the day, even when we came into Eretz Yisrael, it was clear, meaning it was always part of the plan that residence was not going to be permanent. That was an impermanent residence. So Baruch Hashem, we had over 800 years in Eretz Yisrael. We had over 1,000 years in Eretz Yisrael. We had 2 Batei Mikdash that spanned over 800 years. We had a good run. But what was clear was that it was not going to be permanent. It was not going to be permanent. But we'll say that impermanence is reflected on the imperfect division of Eretz Yisrael. That some get this and some get that. What the Gemara is suggesting over here, I think, is that what beauty is when Mashiach comes, Rabosai, that is going to be a permanent and eternal chalukah. When Mashiach comes, we're going to go into Eretz Yisrael and we're never going to have to leave. When Mashiach comes, there's not going to be a third galus. This is it. And that permanence, that beauty, that harmony is reflected in the chalukah itself of Eretz Yisrael. That everyone gets everything. You're going to get some vineyard, you're going to get some orchard, you're going to get a little bit of mountain, a little bit of valley, a little bit of flat field. You're going to get a little bit of everything. That harmony, that perfection is reflected in almost like an equilibrium like chalukah of Eretz Yisrael. So we so eagerly anticipate for. Katani v'asabosa, and I remember how this discussion started? This discussion started with the simple question of, was Eretz Yisrael divided up amongst the Shvatim, or was it divided up amongst individuals? So the Gemara says we got a little bit sidetracked over speaking about Eretz Yisrael, but one thing is clear, which is Miya Katani Miha Shebetchila Lo Neschalka L'Shnei Masar Shvatim Shmamina. So Shmamina L'Shvatim Iflik Shmamina. So we'll say one thing is clear, which is Eretz Yisrael was not divided up amongst individuals. Rather, Eretz Yisrael was divided up amongst Shvatim. So that's how we pass Halacha L'Maaseh. Again, Eretz Yisrael was divided up amongst the tribes, and then it was the job of the tribes to further divide it later on. Okay, Omer Mar. Asid Eretz Yisrael. So now the Gemara is going to go back and kind of dissect the brisa we just read. So the first statement that was made is that in the future, Eretz Yisrael will be divided up amongst 13 Shvatim. So I'll say, that's nice, but there aren't 13 Shvatim. Right? So what's the 13th? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda L'Nasi. So Rav Chisda says, the 13th portion is going to go to the Nasi. Who's the Nasi? If you look in the Rashbam, probably about 8 lines into the wide lines, L'Nasi, L'Melech HaMashiach. Well, so this is actually amazing. Mashiach apparently gets his own portion in Eretz Yisrael. He gets his own chalukah. So the Gemara says, L'Nasi, Dichsev, V'ha'oveit ha'ir ya'avdua mikol shiftei Yisrael. Literally, again, I will say the Oved Ha'ir. Now, interestingly enough, the Mashiach is referred to over here as in Yechezkel, as the Oved Ha'ir, the one who works for the city, because it will say ultimately again, the Melech HaMashiach is a public servant. Right? He works for the Klal. So the Oved Ha'ir, the one who works for the city, works for Klal Yisrael, Yavdu Mikol Shiftei Yisrael. Ultimately, again, he will be served, right? He will be served from Kol Shiftei Yisrael. He will be served ultimately, again, from all of the tribes. Which the Gemara is understanding over here to mean what? The Gemara is understanding over here that Lamaisa, everyone is going to go ahead and give him of their land. So I'm going to Papa, La Baye, Ema Run Gar Ba'alma. Or maybe it means, I don't know, maybe it means that literally the Mashiach is going to have a workforce that is comprised of different shvatim, to which the Gemara says, Lo Sachadait Chedichsev, Va'anosar Lenasi Mizeh Umizeh L'Trumas HaKodesh Alachuz HaSeir. To which the Gemara says, no, because the pasuk seems to indicate that each of the tribes are going to yield or to cede a part of their tribal portion in order to go ahead and make up a portion for the Mashiach. So what does it mean? He says, first of all, it's an incredible yisod that even Melech HaMashiach is going to get a portion in Eretz Yisrael when Mashiach comes. Furthermore, again, remember we said the land, Eretz Yisrael, was divided up according to its value. So what does this mean? Shnei Amar, Bein Rav L'Ma'at. Because the pasuk says, whether you have a lot or a little. So L'mai, what does this mean? So we'll say, does this mean the following? That let's say some shvatim got superior land, some shvatim got inferior land. So are you telling me now that the shevet who went ahead and good morning, Mr. Schoenfeld. The shevet who went ahead and got the superior land has to go ahead and pay money to the one who got inferior land, and that somehow equalizes everything. So the Gemara says, Atu b'shuftani askinam, are we dealing with fools? In other words, we'll say, if you go ahead and you get more expensive land, more fertile land, and you give someone else a cash payment to equalize some of the value, we'll say, that cash payment is nice, but that's a one-time cash payment. L'maisi, again, the person is still stuck with the inferior land, which was presumably is going to yield an inferior yield as well. So how does a one-time cash payment equalize the tribal portions? To which the Gemara says, Ella, lekrovu rechoka. This is actually quite amazing. Rather, again, what it means is the following. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Lekrovu rechoka, we'll say about 7 lines up from the bottom. Hakarkos hayucholkim meshaveh. In reality, we'll say, the land of Eretz Yisrael was divided up equally amongst the tribes. Mishal kech minakachosh notel yoser ad kidami hayafe. So we'll listen to this. In reality, the land was divided up in a financially equitable way, which means that if let's say one shevet got exceptionally fertile soil, they ever get a smaller portion, whereas a tribe that was given more inferior soil got a larger portion. So at the end of the day, the portions were equalized by value. That was done. What was Rabah say? So where was the inequality in their tribal portions? So the Rashbam suggests, the Gemara suggests, it's in their proximity to Yerushalayim. Rabah say, right? Amazing how we're having this Gemara today. In their proximity to Yerushalayim. Because Rabah say, everyone knows that the closer you are to Yerushalayim, the better position you have. The Rashbam goes on, he says, rather, B'kiev l'Yushalayim ma'ala ma'os l'misha ala grala barachok Yushalayim. So we'll say, those who got portions closer to Yushalayim had to go ahead and give a financial payout to those who were further from Yushalayim. Why? What's the benefit of being close to Yushalayim? Sharachok garua mipnei Shnei Dvar, because we'll say being farther away from Yerushalayim is problematic on 2 levels. Echad, mipnei sharachok mi beis hamikdash. We'll say number 1 because you're further from the beis hamikdash. We'll say this is an amazing yisod. All of Eretz Yisrael is Kaddish. We'll say, you understand, like the incredible confluence of events. I just want to point out, that only is a 7.5-year cycle, right? The idea that we're talking about Kira of Yerushalayim, being close to Yerushalayim, being close to the Beis HaMikdash, on Yom Yerushalayim, we'll say, what are the odds? An incredible, this is Hashgacha, like we learn Gana Emunah. Everything is Hashgacha, this is an Ashika, this is a kiss from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we get to do this Gemara today. Because I will say again, a person wants to be close to the Beis HaMikdash. Again, I am far from Yerushalayim, far from the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'echad mipnei shekarufu le'eretz ha'amim v'yesh lo lidog me'en. This is actually very interesting. So Yerushalayim, as you know, is the center of the country. The closer you are to the center, the more protected you are as well. the further you are from the center, the closer you are to surrounding enemies. So those who got a portion farther from Eretz Yisrael, farther from Yerushalayim, had a double disadvantage. Number one, you're further from the Beis HaMikdash. Number two, you're closer to external enemies. Therefore, again, what did they do? So the Gemara says, "V'yesh l'idog ben Rabbi Yehuda milsa ba'ampe nafshe kamar to mishanafol gorolo b'golo." So we'll say fine. So let's go back to the Gemara for just a moment. So the Gemara says, "I'm sorry." So we're going to talk about that right now. So the Gemara says the following. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Biksafim Ha'alua. So Rabbi Eliezer says that they went ahead and they equalized their portion through monetary payments. So we'll say, however they came up with this scale, but Lamaisa, again, there's obviously a premium on living in Yerushalayim, and therefore, again, I will say that premium was added value to the tribal property, and therefore somehow, again, that financial amount was equalized with the other tribes. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Bekarka Ha'alua. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, there was no financial distribution. Instead, what they did was the following. We'll say, if you were in Yerushalayim, close to Yerushalayim, your portions were smaller. Further away from Yerushalayim, your portions were larger. But what about the value? So we'll say, if there's one thing that never changes, it's that what's a big driver in the value of real estate? Big driver? Location. So as I said, at the end of the day, you see, we always thought that Lamaisa, the value of your tribal portion in Eretz Yisrael, was based on agricultural output. The Gemara says, no, that's certainly a part of it, but Lamaisa again, proximity or location to Yerushalayim, was also a major driver in the value of the tribal portion. Therefore, I'm going to say, essentially, the Gemara is suggesting over here is that Lamaisa, they recalibrated the value of all of the different portions in order that everyone should end up with something quote unquote equal. But the value of those portions, the Gemara introduces to us, was not simply based on agricultural output, but Yerushalayim or proximity to Yerushalayim was also a driver in the value. So the Gemara goes back to Lo. Remember, the land was only divided up ultimately again in a lottery. Shneimar ach begorol, Tana ach begorol yati. Tana ach begorol yati Yoshua v'Kalev. So we'll say the Gemara says ach begorol. Mostly now remember the word ach is a miyut. Whenever you see ach is always an exclusionary word. So what does ach come to exclude? It comes to exclude Yoshua and Kalev. That Yoshua and Kalev were not given their portions through the gorol. What does this mean? Lemai ilei medelo shakol klal. When I say that means Yoshua and Kalev didn't get a portion of Eretz Yisrael, we know that's not true. Hashta delav dido shakol didomi by. We'll say if at the end of the day, we just established before that what? Yoshua and Kalev received the portions of the spies, right? We've discussed that not only did they receive their own portions, they got the portions of the Magam. If they got other portions, of course they got their own portions as well. Elo, shalom natlu begora ela al pi Hashem. Rather, what it means is they did not receive their portions through a gora. Rather, the Ribbon Shalom communicated to them directly what their portions were. I both say which Yoshua by Yoshua it says Api Hashem Nasnul Asayir Asher Shaal as Timnas Serach Bahar Ephraim. So by Yoshua it says by the word of God they gave him the portion that he requested, and if the Gemara says Ksiv Amud Beis Serach Ksiv Cheres. So both say calls the tribal portion of Yoshua Serach, and it also calls it Cheres. So we'll say again. So why does it call it by two different names? We'll say before Yoshua took possession of his portion, the fruit was like earthenware. In other words, it was all dried up. It wasn't good. But yet, when Yoshua took possession of them and began to work it, masrichin, they would rot. Now, both say, so you say to yourself, well, that's not good. It means that they were so sweet that if they were not consumed quickly, they would rot, which was an incredible source of bracha. The Ikadami, others explain betchila masrichin. Others say just the reverse. In the beginning, before Yoshua took possession of the portion, the fruit would rot. Ulabasov kecheres. But then when he took possession of it, the fruits would sustain like earthenware, which stays for a long time. But we'll say the point the Gemara is saying over here is that what? Is that Yoshua received his portion not through the gorel, not through the lottery, but rather again only through Api Hashem, through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kalev, Dichsiv Vayitnu LeKalev Es Chevron, Kasher Diber Moshe. So Vayoresh Misham Eshloshe B'nei Anak. So we'll say ultimately again, Kalev, it says that Kalev was given the Hebron as Moshe Rabbeinu said. So we'll say, see over here again, he's not getting it through the Goral, rather again, they're both getting it through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbosai, according to what we learned before, makes sense. Why was the Goral necessary? Why did they need Goral and Urim Betumim? What do we see in the Rashbam? Said no one should have any complaints. Right? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu realized that Klal Yisrael, there were going to be those who complain, he got a bigger portion, he got a better portion, he got a nicer portion. So therefore, again, the Goral, the lottery, and the Urim Betumim were there to say, listen, this is from God. It was like Khalid and Yoshua, who were incredible, or men of incredible emunah. At the end of the day, did not need the Goral, did not need the Urim Betumim. Ultimately, again, whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to give them, their emunah was such that they were ready to accept it. Incredible. Then I will say, get ready for this. Again, it's amazing how today's we'll say, if you Rabbi Nachman has this, we said this over by the Nila Sachag on Pesach. Rabbi Nachman has a beautiful vart where he explains that the power of the neshama is, the guf, the body, is limited in that the body can only be where it is. Right? I'm sitting here. So I can't be somewhere else than where I am right now. The Rebbe says it's not true with the neshama. The soul could be anywhere you want it to be. The Rebbe says, if you close your eyes and you want to feel yourself standing at the Kosel Ma'aravi, you want to feel yourself by Marasa Machpelah, you want to feel yourself, in Sfat, wherever you want to be, that's where your neshama could go. That's neshama goes. So we'll say, we have that koach, and then when you learn Sugyas of Eretz Yisrael, so understand, if you close your eyes, and you don't close your eyes because you should follow inside, but Lamaisa, sometimes, sometimes also, you could close your eyes even if your eyes are open. So ultimately, again, if you close your eyes with your eyes wide open and you open your neshama, you could, when you read these words, you could experience Eretz Yisrael as well. So the Gemara says, Chevron Ir Miklat. The city of Chevron, this is amazing. It's a little known fact. The city of Chevron was an Ir Miklat. It was a city of refuge. Again, that throughout the Eretz Yisrael, there were a number of cities of refuge, which were cities where if somebody killed someone else, b'shogeg accidentally, they would flee to for refuge from the Goladam, from the Redeemer, from the relative of the deceased, of the person who was murdered. So Chevron was an Ir Miklat. So the Gemara says, the Gemara as well says bringing this up as a problem, because how can you say that Chevron was given to Kalev? Right? Remember again, I will say, Arei Miklat were public property. In fact, the only people who really lived permanently in Arei Miklat were who? The Leviim, right? Remember, Levi is not given a tribal area, but the area that Levi does get, right? Levi lives ultimately again in an Ir Miklat. So we'll say at the end of the day, how can you say that Chevron was given to Kalev when it was an Ir Miklat? To which the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Parvarha. So when we don't mean that literally that Kalev was given Chevron, but rather he was given Parvarha, which means, the Rashbam says, Kfarim v'sado shesavev la'ir chutz la'migrash. We'll say he was given the surrounding cities. You're right, he wasn't given Chevron itself. Rather, again, he was given ultimately the surrounding areas around Chevron. Because the pasuk says the fields around the city, the courtyards around the city, ultimately was given to Kaleb ben Yefuna as his achuzah. We'll say, I'll tell you something amazing. And wonder to yourself, so why is it? So think about this for just a moment. Chevron is an Ir Miklat. We'll say, why is Chevron an Ir Miklat? Because think about this for just a moment. When a child is scared and a child requires refuge, right? The child is scared. So where does a child run? Where does a child run? You run into the protective embrace of your parents. I will say Chevron, right, is the burial place of the Avos and the Mos. When the Jew is scared, when I'm uncertain, when there are people running after me, ultimately, again, there's only one place I want to be, and that's under the protective wing of my mother and my father. Such an incredible, incredible idea. So again, it's important also, it's all Hashgacha. Again, Chevron was also, quote unquote, recaptured on Yom Yerushalayim. Remember, Yerushalayim gets all of the credit, and understandably so, it's Yerushalayim. Also understand that Hebron was also recaptured. Of course, it was much less dramatic than the recapturing of Yerushalayim, because also remember again, Hebron was recaptured by an army of one. Hebron was recaptured by Rav Goren. Right? Rav Goren walked in. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kohen Kook Zechat Tzadik Livracha writes. They put out Rav Aviner put out a little chovert, little booklet of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Sichos Hayom Yerushalayim. So when Rav Goren got to Harabayas, so he went ahead and he called Rav Tziyuda Kohen Cook, to tell him that he got to Harabayas, and ultimately again, Yerushalayim is once again ours. So Rav Goren says to Rav Cook, he says, "Do you want to come with me to Hebron?" So Rav Cook says, "I thought that he lost it. I didn't understand. What do you mean, go with me to Hebron?" Well, you and I could say that to each other. You want to go to Hebron today? He says, "You want to go to Hebron?" He said, "We're going to recapture Hebron." So Rav Tziyuda says, "Who's we? Who's we?" Rav Goren says, "We, me and you. Let's go." He said, "I'll send my driver." So it didn't exactly work out, but Rav Goren went ahead, and I will say, the city of Hebron was surrendered to Rav Goren. The city of Hebron was surrendered to Rav Goren. Rav Goren drove into the city with his driver. There were white sheets hanging on the windows, hanging on the storefronts. There was no army, there was no regiment. Rav Goren himself goes in and literally doesn't conquer it. It's surrendered to him. Let's say an incredible, Nisim viniflos. Nisim viniflos. So the Gemara goes right. Let's go. Let's say the Mishnah. All right, back to Yerusha. Back to Yerusha. So Echel ben ve'echel abas ben Achla. So we'll say, now the Mishnah says the following. Echel ben ve'echel abas ben Achla means both sons and daughters share the same when it comes to inheritance. So the Gemara says, Ella, shaben notel pi shnayim b'nichse'av, ve'no notel pi shnayim b'nichse'im. But rather, again, I will say the difference is that a son takes a double portion in the property of his father, and he doesn't take a double portion in the property of his mother. So we already spoke about this beforehand. The din of Pishan, din of a double portion, is only a din ultimately in the property of a father, not the property of a mother. Daughters are supported from the estate of the father, but do not receive support from the estate of the mother. So the Gemara asks the following kasha. My echad haben ve'echad habas lenacha. So what is the meaning of the statement when it says that echad haben ve'echad habas lenacha? As we'll say, the Mishnah begins with a statement that sons and daughters are the same for inheritance purposes. What does that mean? What does that mean? So the Gemara says, "Ilema diyarsi ki adadi." If you want to say that they inherit the same way, so we already learned this. Ben kodim labas. So we'll say, they don't inherit the same. Because we've already established that what? That a son precedes a daughter for inheritance. Not only that, but remember, any descendants of the son inherit his inheritance position and have precedence over the daughter as well. This is what it means to say. We'll say what it means to say is the following. That both a son and a daughter are able to take what we call beroi kiva muchsak. So we spoke about these terms before. So muchsak refers to property owned by the father at the time of his death. Roi refers to items owed to the father at the time of his death. So remember again, I will say the halacha is, we spoke about before that a bechor only takes a double portion in what the father owns at the time of his death, not what is owed to the father at the time of his death. But I will say, for general inheritance purposes, leaving aside Pishan, leaving aside double portion, for general inheritance purposes, the halacha Rabbosa is that both sons and daughters not only inherit that which the father owns, but also inherit that which the father is owed. Ro'i keva mochsak. Which the Gemara says, well, we learned that already. Hanami tenina, b'no slav chad natlu shlosh chalok benachalo, chelek adi and shayim yotzi mitzrayim. So also we already learned that halacha. We learned that in the last Mishnah by Benos Tzlavchad, that the daughters of Tzlavchad took 3 different portions in their father's nachala, the portion of their father, the portion of their father, the portion of the father Yotzi Mitzrayim, his portion with his brothers in Nechsei Chayf. And Rabbi said the assumption is that stuff was roi, not muchzak. Right? That was an entitlement, but Chayfer did not own those things. So we already learned that a son and a daughter inherit not only that which is owned by the father, but that which is owed, an entitlement to the father as well. Va'od, my Ella. Furthermore, I will say, what's the lashon in the Mishnah of Ella? Ella shaben nodal bishnayim. To which the Gemara says, Ella marapabachim. So Papa will say advances another interpretation. Echad aben ve'echad abas, notlin chelek bebechora. So I'll say what it means is the following. That both the son and daughter inherit the bechora of their father. Now, I will say that if, let's say, the deceased father was a Bechor, and therefore is going to get Pishnayim in his father's estate, when the son and daughter inherit their deceased father, they inherit his Bechor position as well. And they inherit his entitlement to Pishnayim. To Gemara says, okay, we learned that already. Hanami tanina v'shahaya bechar not al shnei chalakim. So we already learned this concept before, that if the deceased father himself was a bechar and he predeceased his father, that ultimately the son and daughter inherit their father's inheritance position, their father's Pishnayim position. Va'od my ella. Furthermore, again, I'll say, how do you understand or reconcile the syntax of the Mishnah with that word? Because the Mishnah reads strangely, Echad ben ve'echad bas benachala. So a son and daughter both have nachala, ella, except that what? So we'll say the first statement seems to equate the two nachalos, the two inheritance portions, and then ella seems to indicate that they're different. So the Gemara says, ella amar avashi achikam. This is how you have to interpret the Mishnah. Echad ben habanim ve'echad bas ben habanos. Im amar yorash kol mechasai dvarav kayamim. So let's listen to this. We're going to see this later on. We're going to see this later on Daf Kuflama. Next week we're going to see this. But if you take a look at the Rashbam, so if you look, actually I'll just say this outside just because of time. So let's say the halacha is the following. Not the halacha. The statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Meroka is the following. Let's say a man has a number of sons. And the man says, so Yaakov has Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. And Yaakov says, I only want Shimon to inherit my estate. Thank you. I only want Shimon to inherit my estate. Or for that matter, Reuven has 3 daughters, right? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel. And what happens? He says, I only want Rivka to inherit my estate. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says, such a pre-death declaration works to convey the entire estate to one of the children. As long as what? As long as that children had the proper position of an inheritor. So if a man was going to go ahead and had 3 sons, and his 3 sons were going to divide up his estate, so Lamais, again, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, he has the ability to convey the entire estate to one of the sons, because that son anyway had a position of an inheritor, leaving aside Bechar and Pishnayim for right now. Similarly, if a man just had only daughters, so therefore his daughters are going to inherit, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says that he can convey the entire estate to one daughter. Now we'll discuss where Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka gets this and whether or not we actually paskin this way, but he says that this is the possibility. We'll say, what can't you do? If a man has sons and daughters, right, a man can't say that what? I'm leaving all of my property to my daughter Rivka. Why? Because we'll say that's going against Torah law. That's masna mashakasa Torah. That's going against Torah law. And anytime you go against Torah law, you make a tanai contrary to Torah law, then lamaisi again, what happens? Your tanai is batal. Your tanai is batal. So the Gemara says that's the suggestion over here. So Ravashi is saying, Echad ben habanim, whether you are a son amongst sons or a daughter amongst daughters, if a father says, Yorash kol mechasai, a father gives over his estate to one of the children, his words are upheld. Kiman, whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Both say this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, as we will see later on. But we're going to learn that later on. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka Omer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says, Im Amar Ami Sharai Liyarsho. If a father makes this declaration, assuming that it's about one of his children who is a first position inheritor, then Dvarav Kayamin. Then his words work. Ami Sharai Liyarsho. But I will say, if he says it about someone who is not a first position inheritor, then Ein Dvarav Kayamin. Then ultimately, again, his words are not upheld. The Chitem, so also the Gemara suggesting, or I should say Ravashi suggesting, that our Mishnah is reflecting this idea. The Chitema. Kastam lan Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. So I'll say, maybe you're going to say that our Mishnah, which I will say, if you notice, lacks attribution. The Mishnah doesn't say divrei so and so. The Mishnah is what we call a stam Mishnah, which means a Mishnah without attribution. So maybe you're going to tell me that, therefore, again, because the Mishnah lacks attribution, we know who his opinion is. It's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. I will say, if that's the case, we get into a very interesting technical issue. If that's the case, then it's stam ba'achar kach machlokesi. We will say, that would make this a stam Mishnah. Now we're going to see that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, others disagree with him. The Mishnah on Kuf Lamed is going to record a machlokesi in Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka and the Rabbanon, which I will say just means that from a Mishnaic stylistic level, all we have is the following. A stam Mishnah, which reflects the view of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, followed by a Mishnah that records a machlokes with Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Rabbi said, whenever you have a stam va'achar kach machlokes, a stam Mishnah that reflects a view, followed by a Mishnah that reflects a machlokes, What's the halacha? Ein halacha kistam. Ultimately, again, the halacha does not follow the stam mishnah. So we'll say that'd be problematic. Va'od, my Ella. Furthermore, again, what do you do with the syntax of the Mishnah of Ella? So the Gemara says, Ella Amar Marbar of Hashi Achikamar. This is what it means. We'll just do this last time and we'll stop. Hachikamar. Echad ben ve'echad abas shavin b'nichsei av u'b'nichsei ha'im. Rather, I will say, what the Mishnah means to say is the following. Both a son and both a daughter are the same in that they both stand to inherit the property of the mother and the property of the father. This is what the Mishnah means to say, I will say, that they both inherit their parents. Property of father, property of mother. What's the difference? Ela shaben notal pi shnayim b'nichsei av, v'no notal pi shnayim b'nichsei. I will say, what's the difference? The difference just is that a son inherits a double portion in his father's estate, but does not inherit a double portion in his mother's estate. So I will say, so bottom line, after exhausting all of the possibilities, the Gemara comes back to what we kind of assumed was the Pashat Pshat in the Mishnah from the beginning, namely that Echad Ben ve'Echad Abas Benachala means that both the son and both the daughter stand to inherit their father's estate and their mother's estate. So wherein lies the distinction between their power of inheritance? Elo Shabei Nota Pishtan Benichseav. We'll say the only difference is that a son gets his double portion of Bechora in his father's estate, but does not get the double portion of Bechora ultimately again in his mother's estate. Alright, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up Emirat Hashem bottom of Kuf Chaf Beis tomorrow. I'm going to send up on the WhatsApp group. We're probably going to start a little bit earlier tomorrow because tomorrow is a pretty long daf, so just stay tuned on the WhatsApp group for the start of the shir tomorrow morning.
Does the eldest daughter get each 9 as well?
No, it's a din in the sun.